Good afternoon and welcome to our regular council meeting of Monday, December 12th, 2022. First item on the agenda, our land acknowledgement. The town of Coaldale acknowledges that we are gathered on the on the lands of the Blackfoot peoples of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot peoples past, present, and future while recognizing their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. The town of Coaldale is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Agenda item 1.2, conflict of interest declaration, pecuniary and non-pecuniary. Are there any in the room this afternoon? None declared. We have our regular council meeting agenda before us for December 12th, 2022. Are there any additions to the agenda? Seeing none, can I get someone to make a motion to approve the agenda? Councillor Reese, any discussion? All those in favor? Carried unanimously, thank you. Moving on to adoption of previous minutes, agenda item 3.1, our regular council meeting minutes from November 28th, 2022. Are there any errors or omissions? Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. Under item 15.1, Mayor Van Rijn requested a recorded vote, and it's not listed there.
Okay, thank you. And I also have one for under 10.1 for the public hearing, land use rezoning bylaw 858-P-10-22. One of our guests in the gallery, Ross Taylor, presented and he was in favor of the proposal, and it's listed as that he was not. Are there any other errors? Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And also speaking to 10.1, the public hearing, it should be recognized that one of the presenters, Ryan Casco, was presented before council.
Thank you.
It should be included in the minutes. Thank you.
Anything else? Can I get someone to make a motion to adopt the regular council meeting minutes from November 28th as amended? Deputy Mayor Pickering. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We have our minutes from our special budget meeting of November 30th, 2022. That was meeting 3 of 4. Are there any errors or omissions in those minutes? Seeing none, can I get someone to make a motion to adopt those ones, please? Councillor Saylor, all those in favor? Carried unanimously, thank you. And then we have our special council budget meeting minutes from December 5th, 2022, and that was meeting 4 of 4. Are there any errors or omissions in those minutes? Seeing none, can I get someone to make a motion to adopt those minutes? Councillor Beekman, all those in favor? Carried unanimously, thank you. Moving on to business arising from the minutes. I'm just going to make a change here. We're going to swap 4.1 for 4.2. So starting off this evening, we're going to have our Town of Coaldale Fire Services Master Plan draft presentation. And we have our Director of Protective Services and Deputy CAO, Kevin McKeown, will be co-presenting along with Isaac Comandante. He's a Senior Technical Advisor with Behr Integrated Solutions. And with Isaac, we have Jeff Carslisle. He is I'm sorry, I got that mixed up. So Isaac is the Executive Vice President, and Jeff is the Technical Advisor. So if you gentlemen want to come up to the gallery table there, please, along with Kevin. And then joining us online, we're going to have Rich Hildebrand. He's a Senior Technical Advisor with Behr. And also Kevin Jess, he's a Senior Fire, Life Safety, and Emergency Management Specialist, also with Behr. And we're going to add them to this presentation as well. Gentlemen online, can you hear us?
I can. It's Kevin. Yes, Rich can as well. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So Kevin, if you want to start off, or whichever is going to be doing that, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn and Council. So as discussed, we are here tonight to present the draft Fire Services Master Plan, primarily the 25 recommendations that is included in the plan itself. The plan was attached as an attachment to the agenda. It's 200 pages. So for tonight, we're going to focus on the 25 recommendations, which Jeff and Isaac will be presenting. Appreciate Mayor Van Rijn the flexibility to allow our consultants who traveled here out of town to go first tonight. So I'm just going to go through a little bit of background here on the project itself. Some previous council direction. The Fire Master Plan was discussed at the Emergency Services Committee back in December 6th, 2021. Ultimately, it came to council as a budget request that year for funding for 2022 to complete the project. $50,000 from operating reserve was allotted to conduct the Fire Service Master Plan. How we kind of got to the need for this, the town of Coaldale and our department has never completed a Fire Service Master Plan that specifically looked at the Coaldale and District Emergency Services. We had been included in several past studies with Rutberg County. However, there was never a firm that came in and took a really deep dive, kind of peeled back some of the layers and looked at the operational performance of our department. So we were happy for Behr to come in and do that. With the significant growth that is going to be happening here in the town of Coaldale, and ultimately with the extreme rise in call volumes our department has seen over the last couple of years, I think it's prudent that we did the study now to have a look at our performance and our department's organization. So we're well suited and for the road forward, so we can grow with the development smartly to continue providing public safety in the town of Coaldale. So the draft plan here, it's a comprehensive document, assists elected officials in defining how fire service delivery is expected to develop over a period of time. So in this case, this study is looking at fire service over the next 10 years. The plan provides a range of recommendations and information for council to consider in determining a level of service policy direction for fire service, and provides guidance to make essential decisions to provide a safe and viable community. So, as stated tonight, council may elect to focus simply on the recommendations to be presented and dig into the full plan to learn the how and why underpinning the consultant's recommendations at a later date or at their discretion and convenience. No policy or budgetary decisions need to be made at the conclusion of this presentation here tonight. Rather, the purpose of this report and the presentation by the consultants is to advise council of the key findings of the study. Financial impact. We were successful in obtaining a Alberta Community Partnership grant. We had Rutberg County support to apply for that grant. So we were able to receive $42,000, $158 to put towards the project. Tender price came in at $57,975. So the difference yet to be known, but estimating to be about $17,000 that is not going to be covered by the grant, which does leave us some savings as $50,000 was approved prior to approval and receiving that grant money. Stakeholder engagement. Internal stakeholders, including staff from various town departments, council, emergency services committee members, and external stakeholder engagement with Rutberg County has taken place over this project. And should council approve the draft fire master plan, council may wish to direct administration to develop and propose a public engagement plan to disseminate information contained in the report to the community. So at this point, I'll turn it over to our guests here with Behr. There are some decisions, but we can ultimately come back to that after the presentation. It's all yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief McKeown, and Mayor Van Rijn, members of council, members of the public. Thanks very much for having us here tonight to present the draft master plan to you. I did have a preamble to our recommendations, but thankfully Chief McKeown did it for me. So in light of the scheduling, I'm going to ask Jeff to jump right into the recommendations. Now we do have, again, Rich Hildebrand and Kevin Jess on the line, and if there's any questions, we may direct it to them, but hopefully we can answer all your questions from the table here. So Jeff.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. It's going to be hard for me not to do that $100 food bank donation after over 20 years in the municipal sector. My natural inclination is to say that word, which you're not allowed to say, or it's going to cost you $100. So, all right. So let's go to slide number 9. So we acknowledge that the plan was to span over 10 years, but when we took a look at the type of recommendations that we had, we see that we prioritize them in such a way that most should be completed within 5 years. We recognize that's compressed a little bit. We had a considerable debate about this, but I think once we go through the recommendations, you'll see that this 5-year plan will provide a good roadmap leading forward, up to and including the next 5 years to the 10-year. At first, I would like to acknowledge that your fire service, the Coaldale District Emergency Service, is a very well-led and managed service. You have a number of initiatives that are being undertaken that we consider to be leading practices, and that includes your technical rescue partnership with Picture Butte, your regional emergency management program, which I believe you're receiving a presentation tonight on, and you always win when you consolidate your resources and your response capabilities, particularly when you have large events. And the other one that's really, we applaud you for that, is the tax incentives for your paid on-call firefighters and for the businesses that allow your firefighters to respond. We think that that is a really good, solid approach to part of the retention strategy you need for your paid on-calls for sure. And Chief McKeown and his team has been excellent to deal with. You're very fortunate to have this level of service and the professionalism here in Coaldale. Okay, so this first one is concerning coordination of communication of information between planning and development and CDS. And we know that the communication has improved, but we think that there's a possibility here or potential to have a formalized policy that will make sure that the fire service, the fire discipline, has input in future developments, so that we can look at. This would be particularly important as you look at Coaldale growth and anything out that 10-minute response time that's prescribed in the National Building Code of Canada Alberta edition, and we'll talk to that. So recommendation number 1 is to work with town administration to create a formal policy that includes involvement in the subdivision, land use, and development planning. The cost is neutral, staff time. Oh, okay. The completion time, we're looking at 1 to 12 months. So we know that your district emergency services do have an inventory of facilities as part of a structural risk assessment, but we see an opportunity here that as your data and information systems evolve, that there may be a centralized system that's GIS based, where planning and development would have access to the same system that your emergency services do, and your public works. So there'd be one centralized system, and this could also be expanded into the county. So you're all looking at the same information. You can put your hazard data on there, the types of occupancies that you're building, the types of development, that type of thing, and it helps to assess the risk that you have within your community, within your response zones, in terms of structural fire risk. So
Jeff, I'm just going to invite council, instead of waiting to go through this whole PowerPoint. If anybody has a question, just put your hand up so I can see it, so that we can deal with it right away. Okay, thank you.
So item number 2 is work with the planning, development, and infrastructure departments and the town and the county to expand or enhance the building and infrastructure inventories with digital information, and that way it'll preferably the GIS and environment, and it has a number of applications for both the town, the county, and the departments that I mentioned here. The suggested completion is 48 to 60 months, and the staff cost right now is neutral, depending on what type of systems you evolve into. There'll be some costs associated with that.
Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor, through to the presenters or even to Chief. On number 1 and number 2, would you recommend that part of a robust committee or board to include fire departments, say for example, on the land use planning or the Municipal Planning Commission to review some ideas for what needs to be done there?
I took that, sure. Through to Councillor Chapman. I think part of this, most of it's going to be interdepartmental. I think that's where the efficiencies need to be realized. We have been talking with planning development, ECDA, for a couple of years, and we just haven't quite found the right workflow, I would say, for permits and plans to kind of go throughout all departments, so we all have an opportunity to look at them before development gets approved. So I think it's mostly internal that those efficiencies and improvements need to be made. Thank you.
So recommendation number 3 is about having a council-approved fire department service level policy. Typically it's called a standard of cover, but it can be a service policy. And what this identifies is the core services that you want your emergency services to perform and to what level. So it's a leading practice to have a council-approved policy. It provides clarity for the chief. He knows what services he has to deliver, knows what's training, type of equipment, and it also talks about the sustainability of your emergency services, because it will be known the costs of the various services that you provide. So recommendation number 3 is establish a council-approved service levels for Coaldale District Emergency Service Response. The completion is 1 to 12 months, and it's cost-neutral staff time. Recommendation number 4. This is with respect to the National Building Code of Canada, Alberta edition I spoke to, that we noted in our performance analysis that in some locations within the community, the initial response performance is 10 minutes or more. It's supposed to be 10 minutes and 90% of responses. So there's a couple of options that you have. The one would be build a second station and have a response out of that to cover the 10 minutes. Or the second one would be the one that we would advocate for as firefighters, is to look at establishing a sprinkler bylaw that all new developments would be sprinklered. And of course, there's the limiting distance. When you don't, outside the 10 minutes, your lots are going to have to be further or bigger lots, because there's a 0.5 factor applied to the limiting distance to keep the structures apart. And the whole purpose of that is so that fire doesn't extend from one structure to another. That's why the 10 minutes is there, and it's prescribed in the Alberta Building Code, as I said. So this one is create a council or stakeholder engagement plan to develop a sprinkler bylaw that would allow all new developments and would ensure the compliance with the building code as I've identified. The staff time is, or the completion is 12 to 36 months, and it's a cost-neutral staff time.
So Jeff, a question for you. Have you dealt with other municipalities where something like this has been implemented, where the developer or the municipality gives any kind of a tax incentive for people to do the sprinklers? You know, like in some municipalities, people might be afraid to build in that development area because they have to spend money on sprinklers.
So it's been used extensively in British Columbia, and typically what they do, they offset, if I remember this correctly, the water main system is increased, and there's some incentive in the water supply that you use if you're sprinklered, so you don't pay as high a utility bill. And I'm also aware of Strathcona County did this years ago in exchange for acreages where the houses were further apart. They put cisterns inside these structures that were hooked to the sprinkler system, and this negated the need for the increased water system and provide protection to these larger structures and acreages by being completely sprinklered, including the water supply. So those are the ones that come to mind right away.
Kevin and Rich, did you have something to add to that?
I can, if you wish, Mr. Mayor. We have studied a number of municipalities across the country who have or are going down this line. We did discuss that with your chief administrative officer and your fire chief, and it is possible to provide those tax incentives to basically transfer the risk to the developer and the homeowner rather than the town take on all of the additional risk for new development. We can go into much more detail if you want, and I've referenced in our report the white paper recently published by the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs dealing with partnerships and myth busting in residential sprinkler situations.
That's fine, Kevin, thank you. We got two questions, Councillor Avery and then Councillor Beekman.
Thank you, Mayor. So my question is probably for Mr. Jess. Kevin, why would we put a recommendation like this in a fire master plan when I see this as more of a building and development issue to create that spatial separation in their development rather than putting the onus onto all of the taxpayers as the town expands out? Like, one of the recommendations is a $2 million increase to the fire department budget.
You know, when we looked at Mr. Mayor to Councillor Avery, when we looked at this, the future, as Rich evaluated the statistics and the response data that we had, and we looked towards the future, it appeared to be very much an impact on the fire service moving forward, that to get that response time down, the most if you want to do it and not impact the individual homeowner, then you pretty well are going down the path of full-time 24/7 firefighting, and that's been consistent across the country. Sprinklering can accomplish the same aim, achieve compliance with the building code, and transfer the cost of that risk, at least in some way, shape, or form, to the developer or the future homeowner.
Thanks, Kevin. Councillor Beekman.
So following up on what the mayor had asked about, tax incentives and whatnot for homeowners, to not de-incentivize them for moving to developments where that's a requirement. Are you aware of any increased insurance issues that homeowners with the sprinkler systems might have to endure? Because that extra water is going to cause, or that extra water system in there would cause extra risk to flooding and whatnot.
Actually, if I may, Mr. Mayor, is your question, Councillor Beekman, if I can just clarify, you're worried about the water system having to increase in size to the sprinkler system?
No, not quite. My worry would be an added cost to the homeowner because of insurance. By having that extra water system in there, they'd have to have higher insurance coverage too on their house. I'm just wondering if you're aware of that.
Actually, most insurance companies in the country now provide a reduced fire insurance rate for fully sprinkled buildings, providing they continue to meet the maintenance requirements of them. And in some cases, the actual municipal water system, the water mains and the spacing of hydrants has been reduced because every building in the subdivision is protected automatically.
Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. It triggered a further question in my mind with regards to new developments. I assume that the idea with new developments that they would be new developments would be outside of the 10-minute response time is kind of the
It was Mr. Councillor Chapman through Mr. Mayor. It was our understanding from looking at response data and the mapping and future plans that almost all development would be outside of that 10-minute map at present. There are certainly some infill pieces there that wouldn't necessarily have it apply, and it would be up to council to decide how it wished to proceed in those cases.
Thank you. You answered my second question.
Okay, thank you.
Recommendation number 5 is hand in glove with this discussion about residential sprinklering, that the typical normal pipe size for a residential development is at 3/4. It doesn't supply.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it doesn't supply the volume of water necessary to manage a residential sprinkler system. So this is a recommendation. Number 5 is develop in collaboration with town administration, provides municipal servicing standards for the development, be set at water service pipes using a 1.5-inch normal pipe size. The suggested completion is 1 to 12 months, and the cost is staff time is cost neutral.
So that's an 1.5-inch water line
Residential.
going into a residential structure.
Yes. So in our observation number 6, we looked at dangerous goods are regularly transported by road and rail through Coaldale and Lethbridge County. The quantity and types of material are on the rail are generally known through ongoing communication with CP Rail, although not specifically monitored. Highway traffic is less known and formalized through the dangerous good permits from the Coaldale District Emergency Services. This recommendation says to continue work with transportation companies and local response partners to develop and modify response protocols, pre-incident training scenarios for dangerous goods. This should include a network of third-party responses that can help provide additional resources in the event of a major incident. And this is suggested to be 36 to 72 months and staff neutral. This is just continuation. Sorry? 60. Oh, I'm sorry. 36 to 60 months. I gotta look up every now and then. And this is just to continue the work that you're doing, but understand what's going through your community and have your plans in place, including contractors, along with your staff that's trained and equipped on how to deal with hazardous material spills. Recommendation number 7 is the Fire Smart program. There are grants in place in the province that you can implement the Fire Smart program with the intent of to reduce wildfires within grass and hay wildfires, crop fires, I should say. And this recommendation is work with Lethbridge County to create a crop and grass crop wildfire prevention plan and encourage implementation of the Fire Smart program. Oh, okay. I'm being told I'm very hard to hear, which is not typically normal for me. Okay, the suggested completion time for the number 7 is 24 to 36 months, and there's possible cost offset through a grant program for the implementation of the Fire Smart program, which is a widely used program throughout Canada. Recommendation number 8 is to, we know that you have a QMP and it's in partnership with Lethbridge County, and these are non-emergency response activities that are normally conducted during weekday hours, and right at the present time they're assigned to your full-time staff, which is essentially your leadership staff, to complete these. And it creates a workload issue and capacity challenges for the staff members in meeting their primary roles. So recommendation number 8 is to move toward the implementation of 2 full-time safety codes officer positions that are separate from management and leadership, that they're established to provide that service for both the town and the county and the quality management plan implementation, including the implementation of the Fire Smart program. Suggested completion is 12 to 36 months, and the rough order magnitude cost for 2 safety codes officers in Alberta is $90,000 per year, and an expenditure of $180,000 for your 2 safety codes officers. Recommendation number 9 is the, let me just get caught up here. So this is the this recommendation deals with coordinating your resources when you have a wildfire in the county or the town or elsewhere in the province. You can get your resources deployed from out of your area here. This recommendation is to initiate regular wildfire contingency planning discussions with the town and county DEM, with Director of Emergency Management, with the intent of formalizing and executing a resource allocation plan for multiple simultaneous events. So this is just to take a look at and take care of your own backyard, your demand zones, and consolidate those resources. Be aware of what's being deployed out of there when you have, in the summer during heat and wind and the high activity level for wildfire. Oh, got a good coach here beside me. Okay, the completion is 12 to 24 months, and the staff, the cost is neutral staff time. So we reviewed your bylaw. It has not been updated for 38 years. While it still provides most of the delegation and permissions needed for under the MGA, it has undergone 2 major and multiple minor revisions during that time frame. In addition, the Safety Codes Act and Emergency Act, both which impact the Coaldale District Emergency, have come enacted and amended. This is to develop a revised fire service bylaw for presentation to council in collaboration with the town administration. And consideration should be given to include level of service direction within this bylaw. We talked about the service level. It could be incorporated into the bylaw or identified that there is a separate policy identifying the service and the levels you provide. The completion time is 1 to 12 months, and the cost is a neutral staff time. So we know that, as with any paid on-call or volunteer department, there is challenges right across the country in maintaining your cadre or your contingents of paid on-call. You have a high turnover rate within Coaldale. So this recommendation says conduct a staffing analysis and pursue staffing options to maintain a sustainable paid on-call volunteer firefighter contingent. I don't know if everybody watched the W5 Under Fire presentation that was on again this weekend, and it talked about this. They had people from Canmore interviewed, as well as some departments in Ontario. So this is a problem that is a challenge right across the country for maintaining volunteers.
Can you give us some examples of those staffing options?
There will be some in the presentation that we'll speak to. One that comes to mind is a work experience program where you have people live in the station. There's a recommendation further in the report that talks about reestablishing your evening and your daytime coverage. There's other things like station days where if one of your volunteers has some time off, wants to spend a day working in the station, looking at your peak periods for calls and maybe placing those people in there during those peak periods, sort of thing. So that's a few of the options that come to mind right off the top. So, sorry, is there
Anybody else?
Okay. So this one involves the Alberta Health Services, and we already spoke about right across the country the limitations of the paid on-call service. And when you have a high volume of medical calls, and then you have your routine calls for service, this provides additional stress on that particular system. So in this recommendation, we're looking at this Coaldale District Emergency Services Association, Town of Coaldale, and the Lethbridge County Administrations, and AHS to develop a strategy to decrease the demand on CDES resources for medical responses. This is suggested 12 to 18 months, and the staff time, the cost is staff neutral, and there's potential for staff cost increase depending on the outcome of the analysis.
Councillor Avery.
Can you answer why the association would be part of this? Because my understanding, the association is there for fundraising and stuff like that. They're not the administration of the fire department.
Mm-hmm.
So why would we have the association as part of this recommendation to decrease? medical responses, and we're probably one of the few towns that still has an association even still going. There might be alumni, but actual associations within the fire department. So just need some clarity on that.
Mr. Mayor, this was just to include them as part of consultation, to be aware, and also because that service is impacting them, they may bring something to the table. So it's just more about communication and engagement, and looking at what options exist to in terms of the volume of medical calls and the services they can provide.
Okay, thank you. Can I answer your question, Councillor Chapman?
Thank you, Mayor, and through to Jeff. Could you just expand a little bit on this? Are you speaking about dispatch services to reduce the demand, or what kind of examples can we look at?
I would, Mr. Mayor, is to look at the higher acuity calls. Like, what type of calls are you going on a routine basis? How many times are ambulances predispositioned out of the community that they're relying on Coaldale emergency services? So we have to take a look at all that and see if you're providing the right level of service for the right calls, and not being inundated with lower acuity calls that could be handled by the health services. So your remuneration formula for your volunteers, as I understand it, is a compensation rate. It's a flat rate no matter how long you've been with the service or what responsibilities you have. So we looked at this, and a lot of departments go this way. They restructure their remuneration formula to an hourly rate I should say it's a flat rate, sorry, and formalize your compensation to an hourly rate, and increase the rate based on years of service, rank, and emergency services response. The completion date for this is 12 to 18 months. The staff cost is staff neutral. Obviously, you restructure the pay scale, it may have some cost after you've restructured and had a look at it. It may be cost neutral if there's no increase in the remuneration that you currently provide. This is we talked about this at the front end of the presentation, was that you have tax rebates or incentives for both the paid on call and local business who let their employees respond. Currently, these incentives must be reaffirmed each year by council when it sets its taxation rate. We understand that you have a statutory obligation, you have to set those on an annual basis. Well, in our mind, we thought it would be prudent to have this actually put into a policy so that future councils would know that exists, and it's in a municipal statute that you provide this incentive to your businesses and your paid on call. Understanding that you have complete authority to change or amend any bylaw, but we just thought formalizing this program would be recommended. Get on the roll.
Keep you on track.
Thank you. The suggested completion is 1 to 12 months, and the cost is neutral staff time. So this is with respect to the evening and weekend program that I spoke of as a way to start increasing your response capability by having your paid on call in the station during peak periods. In this case, I'm suggesting that the evenings and weekends are the most difficult, which is typical. Although I have to say there are some communities where everybody doesn't work in the community, where daytime is a challenge. So in this case here, reestablish the paid on call evening and weekend program, and then explore the feasibility of a work experience program or other incentives that enhance interest in recruitment. Work experience program, you bring in a journey person firefighter for a year. They live in the station, they get free accommodation, and they respond, they do maintenance and training and those types of things. Hinton has that program in place. Big White in the Ski Hill in BC, as well as Sun Peaks, have run very successful programs. And what's in it for them is they get a letter from the fire chief at the end of the year that helps them obtain full-time position as a firefighter if that's their choice. The completion, undertake a feasibility study for I'm way ahead of myself. The suggested completion is 6 to 12 months, and it could be 30 to 50K per year depending on the program requirement.
Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor. Recommendation 14 and 15 through to the chief. Is this something that would be also applied to those in doing training nights? I think they would be paid their hourly rate.
Yeah, they get paid right now as it is when they attend regular training nights. It counts towards their hours, which gets divvied up at the end of the year. So they would be paid again according to their wage scale for training.
Thank you.
Recommendation number 16, we're aware that you have a small training area here in the town, but you do not have a live fire training facility. And you, to obtain this training, you've been relying on either Lethbridge or Tabor training facilities. And this requires that your emergency response people and apparatus respond out of their area to go training. So this recommendation number 16 is to undertake a feasibility study for the development of in-house live fire training structure. The timeline for this is 24 to 36 months. The staff time, it's neutral cost at this point, but the potential to increase the capital to establish a live fire training facility depending on the outcome of feasibility. And there's lots of different types of structures that there's a CCAN one which comes to mind that you can put in place fairly easily and use that for your live fire training rather than deploying your resources out of the demand zones. Okay. So during a review of of your policies and operational guidelines, we noted that there's a number that are being reviewed, but also there's some that are outdated. And this recommendation is to continue the update of all operational policies and guidelines, as well as prioritizing suppression staff review process for all high risk or fire safety related guidelines. So you would color code red interior fire attack, confined space entry as material that would require a continuous review by your operational staff to ensure that they understand what the policies are. The suggested completion is 12 to 24 months, and then ongoing continuum of reviewing, and the staff the cost is neutral staff time. Recommendation number 18. This is the one I mentioned at the front of the recommendation. I know that you're aware of working with Picture Butte right now in your technical rescue and developing a partnership and consolidating some of your resources. So this is to pursue the opportunity to establish a regional tech rescue response model with Picture Butte Emergency Services. That way you don't have to train all your staff to do all those types of rescue from, ice rescue, steep bank, elevator rescue, or those types of rope rescue, that type of service. Suggested completion is 12 to 24 months, and the cost is neutral to staff time. So this recommendation number 19 is about your Safety Codes Act, the fire discipline, and your current QMP. So this is to having a integrated fire safety inventory system which assigns a property risk profile to identify high priority risks and develop risk management strategy. This talks about taking your QMP and looking at your high risk, high life risk facilities and focus your fire prevention and public education, your safety codes functions on those. Recommendation number 10, review and revise in conjunction with Lethbridge County the fire discipline schedule with respect to QMP and initiate a risk-based inspection program that provides methods to further quantify site risks and direct property-based or priority-based schedules focusing inspections and compliance efforts on structures and facilities presenting a high level. So typically this would be your assembly occupancies, your care facilities, and your industrial occupancies. Industrial primarily because they are the occupancies of highest non-compliance.
And Jeff, for our viewers at home, what does QMP stand for?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. QMP stands for Quality Management Plan, and it's a requirement under the Alberta Safety Codes Act and fire discipline, which involves fire investigations, inspections, and public education. And Kevin, if I missed anything, Kevin can help me. Recommendation number 20. We are aware that Coaldale has a life cycle equipment program for each piece of equipment and an anticipated replacement. There is a standards with the NFPA, National Fire Protection Association, and the Underwriter Laboratories of Canada that typically frontline vehicles need to be replaced every 15 years. This observation involves your capital reserves and the sustainability for the fleet. So review your current mobile equipment list and confirm life cycle replacements and the related capital reserves to ensure fleet sustainability. So each year we recommend you take a condition survey of your vehicle, project how long it's going to last, keep in mind the leading practices standards, and make sure that your reserves has the resources in it to replace the truck or whatever the equipment is at the time that it is no longer of reliable service. And this will avoid debenture borrowing or other types of purchasing to maintain your fleet. Observation number 21 is that we looked at your analysis of your responses and indicated that about 12.7% of your call volume were from alarms ringing for non-fire events or false alarms, which were not recorded as emergency response elsewhere within the data provided. Now, I think, Rich, you can chime in on this one, is that that 12.7% of emergency calls weren't all necessary false alarms. It's just the way you categorized your data. Nonetheless, recommendation number 12 is to assess your call alarms ringing, which result in a response to emergency situation, to determine the number and frequency that could be reduced by coordination of alarm inspections, possible revisions to the application of respective fees and rates. In other words, if you're a frequent flyer and we keep responding to your business because your system is not maintained, you may get an opportunity to provide a donation to the town of Coaldale. And also revert this concern with Lethbridge County regarding incidents occurring within the county. So I'm sure that there are instances where you're responding to alarms ringing in the county as well. So take a look at that. And again, the idea is to reduce the impact on your volunteer firefighters. Oh, and the suggested completion is 1 to 12 months. The cost is supposed to be cost neutral, but it's cost neutral and staff time.
That's a firefighter.
Cost neutral. Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to press on. I recognize the time.
No, you're doing very well.
Okay. So we took a look. Observation number 22. We looked at the city of Lethbridge 911, their communication center, and their performance. There is another National Fire Protection Association standards that identifies 75 seconds as the standard to alarm handle process a call. And it's in the 90th percentile. In this case, the 90th percentile for Lethbridge was 18%. So this recommendation is to identify the alarm handling process improvement opportunities and establish contractual alarm handling service level expectations benchmark. Your current agreement doesn't have that. It says alarm handling will be 60 seconds and 14 seconds for transfer or whatever the increments are. And this way you have a performance measure with the Lethbridge Public Service Access Point or 911. The cost is neutral, staff time, and we're suggesting 12 to 24 months. And the more time you can compress that alarm handling, the larger your response footprint will go in terms of that 10 minutes. So when we do the total response time, it's your alarm handling, your assembly time, and your travel time is the increments that are used to determine that 10 minutes. Recommendation number 23. Your volunteers are doing very well at responding to the station within 7 minutes and 38 seconds. We typically see ranges from 5 to 8 minutes. Your 90th percentile for 2021 was at 7 minutes and 38 seconds. And what this recommendation is identify and implement opportunities to improve emergency response assembly time. So we all know that you're sitting at home or at work or whatever, the alarm goes off, we, on our pager, we drive to the station, we get in the vehicle. That takes time. Are there ways that you can shorten that time, that 7 minutes and 38 seconds? We talked about some of the incentives with the evening and weekend programs or web program, but maybe there's other pre-alerts or other types of things you can do where you get your effective response force or the number of firefighters you need to respond to the station quicker. And again, when you do that, your 10-minute footprint gets bigger.
So just for clarification then, the 10-minute response time includes the time it takes from the paid volunteer to get to the station as well?
That's right. Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. So that 10-minute time, actually, the clock starts as soon as the dispatcher picks up the 911 call. So if they're taking 3 minutes to process that call, they still need to tone us out. We still need to get to the station. So that 10 minutes is now 7 minutes. If it takes 7 minutes to get to the hall, now we have nothing left.
Yeah. Kalen, sorry.
Thank you. Just a quick question on that. Is there a way you can isolate that variable and subtract the average time from dispatch from the time that the call is received, so you can track what the time is upon learning about a call to the fire hall and just separating out that data just from a performance perspective?
We can, for sure. There's different ways to look at it. So I know in the report, I believe they looked at NFPA 1720 as well too as for performance metrics. So NFPA 1720 does not include the dispatch pickup. It's from when the fire department gets the call.
Okay.
So if Rich wants to chime in too, but he did look at different times as far as how long it takes us to get to the hall and out the door versus how long PSCC is taking to handle the call. So we definitely can. When we look at our incident report, we can see what time they picked up and what time we got dispatched.
Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm through to Jeff again. I'm trying to get through my mind here on observation number 22, and you mentioned 18%. And I'm trying to, when I read through this, it would be also on page 51 of our agenda, but the compliance from 2017 through 2021 was a 5-year average of 18%. So is 18% a good number then, or are we looking for a much better number like 100%? Or is that?
Mr. Mayor, what you're looking for is the 90th percentile measure is 90% of all the calls into Lethbridge are processed within 75 seconds. This is saying you only achieve the 75 seconds 18% of the time.
Oh, okay.
So it's a challenge for sure, because you can see, and as Councillor Avery is very correct, that 10-minute response time is a building code regulation so that communities build safe communities. But you can see where it hits the fire department in terms of dispatch time, assembly time, and travel time, your transportation network, those things. So that's what this is saying here. We can manage those increments that we can manage, which is the alarm handling and to a certain extent the mobilization or assembly time. Then that's what we're targeting.
Okay.
I think Rich has a comment.
Rich, go ahead.
Hi, Your Worship. Yes, I'll just make a quick comment here. Is we took the city manager or the town manager's earlier question. We did break out the alarm handling for individual incident types. It was quite long for medical calls and much shorter for fire calls, just because of the nature of the questioning and the information that the dispatchers have to gather. But there's no question that there is some, and I think the chief is already working with Lethbridge in identifying some of those issues, and they're already working on strategies to improve these things. But at the end of the day, if you can find a way of shaving any time off that alarm handling, shaving any time off the assembly time, it's going to reduce your overall response time. And so this is the aim, is just to continue to improve on each of those elements of total response time.
Thank you, Rich. Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you. And Mayor, through to Rich, then, are you saying then that first responder time for ambulance calls is included in this, or is this strictly all for fire related?
It was really measuring the responsiveness of the fire engines and fire related apparatus. So you do have an excellent, I'd say, best of class system where you have 3 fire or 4 fire chiefs that are all capable of managing some of these first response incidents, the medical response incidents, or and respond very promptly to these kind of things. But when we looked at this, we wanted to really understand what was the responsiveness of the fire resources themselves.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jeff.
Recommendation number 24. This goes in line with the service level policies and the core services you provide. Each response you provide, there are critical tasks that need to be done. For example, a structure fire, if you're following the National Fire Protection Association, a typical 2,200 square foot house would require 17 firefighters if you use an apparatus to assemble and handle that, and that's based on the critical task analysis. So in this, what we're saying here is look at those frequent services you provide and do a critical task analysis. Now, typically the initial response will be a 4 to 5 firefighter engine. For example, this also goes into your motor vehicle collisions, your dangerous goods, any of the services you provide. You take a look at it. What are those critical tasks that need to be done, and how many firefighters do you need to do that? So we're saying here, complete a critical task analysis for common emergency incident types. And you conduct that in the next 12 to 36 months to coincide with your service level policy, and the cost is neutral. It's staff time. We're on the home stretch, Mr. Mayor. So this one is the records management system that you're currently implementing, and does not have the support functionality to easily generate performance report and retrieve response information. You're in the process of implementing first due as replacement records management system. We talk about the benchmarks and the increments of your response system. This is key to having a system that can capture that type of data. So recommendation 25 is to continue with the implementation of the first due RMS records management system with the functionality to support automated data imports and adequate reporting functionalities. This is basically saying that Lethbridge 911 can transfer the data in there so you can analyze it and have those increments that how long the call handling was, alarm transfer, those types of things. And the completion is 1 to 12 months, and it's cost neutral because you've already adopted by the town and county and is in progress. Mr. Mayor, that completes our 25 recommendations, and I'd like to thank you for your time in indulging us in this presentation.
Well, you do your job very well, Jeff. Thank you very much for that presentation. I have a question before I open it up to council. So how do we roll this out to the general public? If anybody wants to speak to that.
Yeah, I know. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think what we could do is kind of meet with some staff internally first, and perhaps meet again as the Emergency Services Committee to determine how best to roll this out to staff. When Mel and he was here, we talked a couple times. So with the new personnel and planning, we should engage with them and try to figure out what they want to do for public engagement, if that's open house or pushing information out into social media. I think along the lines of level of service and that direction in policy might be a perfect time to engage with the community to find out what the community expects of us and what service levels they want us to be doing as well.
And timelines for something like that?
I would say in the first half of next year.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up to members of council. Any questions for either of our presenters? Rich or Jeff, have you guys got any closing comments?
I think you're referring to Rich and Kevin,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if I might, I just wanted to thank you. 6 months ago, I expressed my enthusiasm for this project, and I was very happy to work on it to see a community that's doing well, wanting to do better. And I think the contents of the plan, although there will be some questions, and we're certainly able to answer those as they come up, we certainly appreciated the opportunity to work on a very positive engagement with the town of Coaldale and your staff. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Well, Isaac, Jeff, thank you. Well, go ahead. Go ahead, Rich.
Your Worship, yes, sorry for interrupting. I'd just like to echo what Kevin said. You have a first, and you always have had a first-rate volunteer department, such a long-standing and proud history. So, yeah, it was a pleasure, and yeah, hopefully we can get some of these recommendations landed and put to bed soon.
Okay, thank you very much, and I appreciate the kind words from yourself and the other members of your delegation towards our department. Our council echoes that considerably. So, no more questions, comments? Then I would like someone to sponsor a resolution that council receives the presentation of the draft fire services master plan from Behr Consulting as information, and further that council approves the draft plan as presented. Councillor Avery makes that motion. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. Safe travels home.
Thank you.
Kevin, Rich, thank you for participating.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy holidays to everyone in Coaldale.
Kevin, thanks for not sneaking a shecky in there at all.
I tried not to, and I tried to stay away from your worship because I think Rich owes you $100 now.
Yeah, $200. Yes. Okay, thank you. Take care.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas to you all.
Safe holidays, everybody.
Okay, moving, we're going to go back up, I should say, to agenda item 4.1, 2023 budget deliberations. We have our Chief Financial Officer and Deputy CAO, Kyle Beauchamp, presenting. Kyle, when you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you and good evening, Council. So we're nearing the end for budget deliberations for 2022 here. So we did have four budget meetings previously, which we went through kind of how the town financial works, some options for status quo, and some service enhancements with some capital items as we discussed. So can we slide down to the couple pages here? Yeah, keep going. Keep going. Next page. Yep. Keep going. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so this is the draft operating budget presented to council. So just a reminder that the operating budget is a 3-year financial plan. So 2023 is essentially based on council's discussions and motions and recommendations from the last council meetings. Everything is included in there. 2024 and 2025 are presented as the 3-year operating plan. So this again just kind of sets the base work and the framework for future years. So very similar to the budget for the next couple of years. But again, it's not set in stone. So if you have questions or uncertainties for future years, these future years will be presented to council at future budget meetings to discuss and deliberate, and they can't change. So just touch on a few highlights from this operating budget. So total budget for 2023 would be $20,729,452. The total tax support, so total funds from taxes would be $9,563,131. This includes supplementary tax assessment as well. So we're looking at the budget. There was a funding gap of $189,281 that would have to be funded through taxes to balance the budget. Based on discussions from the last council meeting, this was the equivalent of a 1.84 tax increase for residential properties and a 3.22 non-residential tax increase. So after some discussions, this was based on a 1.75 to 1 tax ratio between non-resident and residential. In addition to the tax to balance the budget, there was also an increase of the franchise fees, so natural gas and electricity franchise fees in Coaldale. So electricity would go up from 13 to 16%, and the natural gas would go up from 15 to 18% to get that total operating budget of $20.7 million. When we're just looking at the draft budgets for 24 and 25, currently as it sits, right, these will change, but there's a 2.98% tax increase required to fund the budget. This does include earmarked $100,000 for a road rehabilitation program. Again, these are all items that will be discussed and returned to council deliberations in November 2023. When we're looking at 2025, draft budget is a 2.47% tax increase required to balance, as well as that earmarked road rehabilitation program. Well, if you can just go to the next page, please. Next page. Okay, so this is the town's 2023 to 2027 capital plan. So the total budget is $35,626,000. Kind of a one asterisk on this is you may be going through this item list and think, hey, there's a couple items we talked about that aren't on this capital budget. Some of the projects have to be moved they were discussed as capital, but they had to be moved to the operating budget, just the way the accounting standards work. So nothing has been excluded or taken out from discussions with council. As you see in your package on the previous page, some of them have just been moved to the operating budget. Items earmarked for 2024 through 2027, new items, not construction funding, will be revisited by council on a year-to-year basis as part of future budget deliberations. This budget doesn't include any additional debt funding, so we're not using any debenture funding for any of these projects. Decision options available to council. So in accordance with the MGA, we must have some type of budget passed before the end of the year. Again, whether it's a final budget approved by council or an interim budget which council wants to reopen and rediscuss in the new year. But regardless, some type of budget does have to be passed tonight as part of the municipal government requirements. With that being said, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it back to you for discussion and debate.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up to council for any questions or comments for Kyle. Councilor Avery.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a comment, I don't need any feedback, but I just wanted to make note that I've been reading in that municipal information for the last few weeks about a lot of municipalities are putting less in their piggy banks, making sure their taxes aren't going up considerably because of the economic state that the country is in, not just the province. So, it is seeming to be a common practice because, like I say, I'm reading it most mornings in that municipal information that communities are not putting money into their reserves, or 2 to 3% less this year than previous years.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Councilor Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and maybe through to Kalen or Kyle. I know it's not part of this agenda package, but if we could get a debenture report sometime in the future as to where we're at with what's owing on debentures and that.
So all that information is contained in the annual financial statements.
Okay.
So if you pull up our financial statements from last year, it will show how much debt we have and then our debt ceiling. So what's the max debt we can pull out? That information will be updated and brought to council in April with the 2022 financial statements. So that will be the next time we'll have that information available to council.
Perfect, thank you.
Kalen, you had a comment?
I was just going to add that I believe that information is also in the first PowerPoint slide deck for background information.
Seeing there's no further questions or comments, we have to break this down into 4 separate motions. So the first one that I need someone to sponsor is that council approve the 2023 to 2025 operating budget as presented. Councillor Chapman, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Beekman, Councillor Avery, opposed, motion carried. Second resolution I need someone to sponsor, that council approve the 2023 to 2027 capital budget as presented. Oh, sorry.
Can I have our votes recorded, please?
Yes.
Is that just, sorry, for
The
clarification?
first one as well.
Yes, all of them, please.
Okay. So I'll repeat the second resolution I need a sponsor for, that council approve the 2023 to 2027 capital budget as presented.
Make that motion.
Councillor Chapman, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Opposed, we have Councillor Beekman, Councillor Avery, and Deputy Mayor Pickering. Motion is carried. Third resolution I need a sponsor for is that council approve a 3% increase to the electrical franchise fee rate, increasing to 16% effective 2023. Does someone care to sponsor that resolution? Councillor Saylor. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? We have Councillors Beekman, Avery, and Deputy Mayor Pickering opposed. The motion is carried. Fourth and final resolution I need a sponsor for is that council approve a 3% increase to the natural gas franchise fee rate, increasing to 18% effective 2023. Does someone care to sponsor that resolution? Councillor Chapman, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? We have Councillor Beekman, Councillor Avery, and Deputy Mayor Pickering opposed. The motion is carried. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.
Don't go away.
Just for, Mr. Mayor, just for parliamentary purposes, or I guess for Kyle as well, we can't defeat a budget through this motion, could we? You can't defeat an operating budget as per the MGA.
You can. So again, a budget does have to be passed by the end of the year as under the MGA. Whether it's a final budget or an interim budget that council opens up for deliberations again starting January 2023. So those were basically the two options that we've kind of touched on in the past. Yeah.
Okay, moving on to bylaws and policies. Agenda item 7.1, the utility rate bylaw 860-C-12-22, second and third reading. We have Kyle speaking on that as well. Go ahead, Kyle.
Okay, thanks again. So Town Council did pass first reading of this utility rate bylaw at the December 5th, 2022 special council meeting. So yes, we do have second and third reading presented tonight. Just kind of, again, a quick summary of the changes in here. Section 3, the variable water consumption is increased from $1.20 per cubic meter up from $1.093. Bulk water is increased to 3.84 cents per cubic meter, up from 3.66.
Kyle, if I could just interrupt and just get you to back up and give us a reason why those increases are needed.
Sure. So both for section 3, where we're talking about variable water consumption and water. I think it's first important to highlight that these rates haven't increased since January 1st, 2019. Meanwhile, the actual cost of water that the town has paid over those number of years has increased. But this increase is largely due to building up funds and future financial capacity to purchase additional water rights that will be required as the town continues to grow. I'm not sure the exact growth figures or year projections, but when the town does require additional water rights for future growth, they will have to be purchased somehow. So what we're trying to do is some long-term financial planning. So we're slowly building up financial capacity when we get that point, rather than scrambling when we actually need water rights. So that is the reason for the water discussion here. Section 5 relates to solid waste. So there's no actual changes in any of the fees. This is just more wording updates to the bylaw to reflect current practices that are in place right now. Section 6, the storm fixed monthly fee up $2 a month, so from $7.95 up to $9.95. This is again related to capital projects. So we touched base on the Malloy 2B project during capital budget deliberations, in which the current budget of 3.1 is likely to will have to increase from anywhere between $6 to $9 million for that project to be undertaken. So to bridge that funding gap, again, looking at more of a slower increases over a number of years to reduce financial shock from a 1 year lump sum increase to fund that amount. Section 8, we're looking at the water meter fees. So the actual cost of a water meter that the town pays. The 3/4 inch, so the standard water meter for a house, residential house, there's no change there. But anything over 1 inch has increased significantly in price over the past couple of years. So that's more for non-residential and larger developments. This is to accurately cost that water meter, so the town isn't losing money on that when those water meters are sold and installed in new development. Finally, Section 9, increase in the disconnect and connect fees and hourly labor rates charged for special projects. This is increased just to reflect the increasing labor cost. Again, this one also hasn't increased since January 1, 2019. So decision options available for council. They could approve second and third reading tonight. Council can also request further changes from administration before proceeding. Should council wish not to pass these changes to the utility bylaw, administration would request alternative direction from council to address the funding gap for these projects that we've just discussed. So that being said, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So question before I open up the council, then back to the water price level changing. Like you said earlier, the price increase. So can you talk a little bit about the increase of potable water from the city of Lethbridge?
So the water that we purchase from the city of Lethbridge is purchased through the Water Commission. So there's two charges there essentially. There's the cost of the water that the city bills to the Water Commission. There's also a capital replacement cost that the commission bills based on how much water is used. So both of those rates will be increasing January 1. I'm not sure specifically on the amount that the city is increasing. But again, the cost of water traditionally does go up every year. The town does pay more per cubic meter for each water that we do require. So there is a additional funding generally required to maintain the revenue and expenses equal to each other.
And is it safe to say, like, this increase will also go towards the project of the new potable water reservoir?
It could, yeah. So as we as the water reservoir study is completed this next year, there's still a lot of unanswered questions as to the full scope of the project, the cost of the project, and the funding required for the project. So when we look at our utility reserves and the amount we're putting towards our future water infrastructure, this increase should add approximately $100,000 to those reserves annually. So that increase can go towards water rights. It could also go towards the water reservoir. But again, I think what the important thing is, we do have a number of large capital expenditures and infrastructure that does need to be replaced. So it's important for us to maintain operational funding to pay for these items. So this is partly what we're doing, is looking at these expenses in the beginning, a few years before they're actually required to be paid, so we can reduce the financial shock associated with some of those expenses.
Thank you. And just to make a comment that everybody around this table knows the importance of us looking at purchasing water rights and the fact that that's going to be expensive. So we need to start, and to use Council Avery's term, we need to start putting money in the piggy bank so that we can afford those water rights when the time comes. Also, some of the initial budget prices that came back for that potable water reservoir was in the $9 million mark that we need to start putting money away for as well. So I think it's important for our residents listening at home to understand that where this money is going to be going towards. It's not just a money grab that we're taking this money. We need it for definite purposes. So with that being said, I'll open it up to members of council for any questions or comments for our CFO. Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn, and through to Kyle. Would it be possible just to get a staff report of surrounding municipalities, how much their water is going up, just for curiosity's sake?
Yeah, we could look at something in the new year. So when we had the budget deliberations, there was the one section that we estimated based on how much water the average house used, if it was like say 10 cubic meters or 20, how much utilities and some water, garbage, sewer everybody was paying. So that data was based on obviously 2022 before these increases. So if council would like to see that information updated post 2023 when all the new budget figures and utility rates comes out, that's something we can look at, yes.
Is that something through to council? Are you guys interested in that?
Well, I'll make a comment on that. It's a great question, but every municipality is dealing with different infrastructure concerns. And in our case, we're looking for water rights, additional water rights, and we're also looking for building a potable reservoir. So that explains why some of these price increases are. You get a different municipality, it depends what difficult items they're up against. So we can definitely get those comparables, but I don't know if that has any bearing on this discussion tonight. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor. You brought up a great point with the Water Commission, and of course, as everybody knows, we receive our water, potable water, from the city of Rutberg. So the commission is mostly a handler in the delivery of water. So we're I guess in a roundabout way, well, actually almost in a direct way, we're at the mercy of the city in their billing rate for volume of potable water. So the commission has no jurisdiction over the price of what the city charges. So when it arrives at the town of Coaldale, it obviously becomes somewhat inflated with a small administration fee and then the capital replacement surcharge fee.
Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm speaking against it again. I'm not. We're talking everything we've increased tonight for $600 to $720 per household in an increased taxes and franchise fees. So I don't understand why we get to be the privileged ones to keep putting money in the bank and nobody else does. And I understand there's projects and there's water rights and there's all these other things, but if there's not this $720 that we have to, that we're getting to put in a piggy bank, and these homeowners are going to go without, they're going to go without feeding their kids, they're going to go without maybe that one night out a month because we are being entitled by putting money in a savings account all the time. We need to look at everybody holistically today and for the next year. I don't want to be, we're privileged. We need to look at those that are not.
Just a comment to your comment, Councilor Avery, is that we're trying to do it in a slow increments. When the time comes that we need to build this $9 million reservoir, that it's not a question of we might need it, we will need it. So when the time comes that we're going to say, yes, we're going to go ahead with that, do we want to take out a huge debenture where again, we're going to go back looking for tax support to offset that debenture? So here we're being fair to the residents by doing it in increments instead of giving them a big surprise down the road when we need to buy water rights or we need to build this underground water reservoir. I'll open up for any questions, comments. Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a question. Maybe you could answer it actually.
You just speak up a little.
Yeah, will there be grants available for this at all?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, I need someone to sponsor the resolution that council provides second reading of utility rates bylaw 860-C-12-22. Anyone want to sponsor that resolution?
I got a question before you do that, Mayor Van Rijn. The only question I have is on that fixed storm rate, what determined the $9.95 up from $7.95?
With the right now, there's admin is working on that stormwater kind of master plan, so that the full extent of the cost isn't known. But when we looked at the budget was at 3.1, we need to go anywhere from $6 to $9 million. We put a couple of scenarios as to a couple dollar increase over a couple years and how that could get us to that additional funding required for the project. So I believe in one of the budget discussions that we had when we talked about utility rates, it might have been the second or the third one, based on the projections we had, we said in 3 years we would have an additional, based on savings and debt capacity that could be built up, an additional $3.8 million that could be used to fund that project. So that's kind of how we got as that soft landing spot to get there. This $2, to be clear, this $2 doesn't fully solve the deficiency from the Malloy project. So this funding scenario and structure will have to be revisited again when the stormwater master plan is completed, when we know more of the extent and the cost. But that's kind of our best reasonable guess right now to get us started on something.
Thank you.
Any more questions, comments? Councillor Chapman.
Just a typing error on the utility rate bylaw for 5.2 under commercial consumers for 5.22 and 5.23. Although you talk about garbage in 5.521, you're speaking about the same thing using solid waste. So should that all be sort of equal across?
Yes, we'll make those changes to reflect that. Yeah.
Thank you.
So back to a sponsor for a resolution that council provides second reading of utility rates bylaw 860-C-12-22. Anybody care to sponsor that resolution? Councillor Chapman. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? We have Councillors Beekman, Avery, and Deputy Mayor Pickering opposed. The motion is carried. Need someone to sponsor the third and final reading of utility rate bylaw 860-C-12-22. Does anybody care to sponsor that one?
Okay, I'll do that one.
Councillor Chapman. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Beekman, Councillor Avery, and Deputy Mayor Pickering opposed. Motion carried. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.
Moving on to new business item 8.1. We have a request for a letter of support from SAWA, that stands for Southern Alberta Energy from Waste Association. And just brief outline that SAWA's mission, with the support of its 51 municipal members, is to bring forward a solution that will reduce environmental and economic impacts of landfilling waste by developing an energy from waste facility that will treat 300,000 tons of non-recyclable waste, and that will reduce 7 million tons of GHG over the life cycle of the facility and create 500 jobs. In 2021-2022 has completed a formal request of expression of interest, and they've had 3 submissions. And SAWA will be submitting an application to the Alberta Community Partnership later, or next week actually, December 16th, 2022, to intake for the consideration of the Alberta government, having recently discussed the project with both the Premier and Alberta Minister's Office. The project is understood and that the development has a multi-benefit to Alberta and globally, that it will reduce CO2 and methane emissions, which is largely being attributed to climate change impact. So the association, SAWA, is looking for a letter of support from Coaldale, or the town of Coaldale, I should say. Myself and Councillor Chapman, Councillor Avery, Deputy Mayor Pickering met with our citizen member, Kim Craig, on November 23rd to discuss the project. And Councillor Chapman, did you have any comments from that meeting, or you're the alternate on the SAWA committee?
I don't have anything further.
Okay, perfect. So with that being said, is there someone that wants to make a resolution that we sponsor, or I should say that we supply a letter of support? Councillor Reese, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. And then item 8.2, the Regional Emergency Management Partnership. We have Clayton is going to be presenting on that. Kevin, are you going to be sticking around, or you leave it?
I will sit here with Clayton.
Okay, perfect. So one of you gentlemen, when you're settled in, you want to present on that, please.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Van Rijn and Council. Here tonight to we have a bit of a presentation on a concept of regional emergency management for you guys tonight. So a little bit of background about this. Some talk started last year between Lethbridge County and the town of Coaldale on what a regional emergency management program might look like. And this was kind of prompted by our AEMA field officer at the time. From there, we did have a bit of a initial meeting with DEMS and CAOs and AEMA, Alberta Emergency Management Agency, on what a regional concept might look like for Lethbridge County and all the municipalities within it. In January of 2022, AEMA did have a municipal elected officials course, which there was a variety of councillors on from different municipalities. within Lethbridge County, where there was a bit of a presentation and discussion about that idea during the course. In February of 2022, we investigated a little bit further and had a survey go out to all the stakeholders, so all the municipalities, to kind of gather everybody's input on what that system might look like and how it might function for us here within the county, so that we could put a bit of a plan together with all the 6 municipalities involved on how we might go forward with that. A few meetings later and some discussions between DEMs and CAOs, we were able to come up with a bit of a plan and a presentation that we're delivering here before you today. So why look regional? Just a few events that have occurred over the years. And again, by no means is it all encompassing. It's just a few examples of events that have happened within Lethbridge County and the immediate area that have had some type of impact on a lot of the municipalities, not just one single municipality. So we're seeing these events more and more, and the potential is for those events to affect us here as well in Coaldale. Another reason why regional, looking outside of our borders, there's been other events that have happened where other regional systems have dealt with events, or where regional systems would have been very beneficial, as described in their after action reports. So some of those municipalities are regional in there and some are not. So a little bit more background on why regional. Larger events, especially events where we're operating for 24/7 for a few days, require a lot of personnel and response to that. And realistically, no municipality within Lethbridge County is able to fill all of our positions within our Emergency Operations Center for a large, long duration event without the help of our partners. So some different components to putting together a regional emergency management system that we looked at as a group is having one regional emergency advisory committee authorized by a ministerial order, which would have representation from all the communities involved. The creation of a regional emergency management agency, which would see us pooling our resources within all the municipalities to do stuff like fill all our positions within our EOC and provide that depth for multiple shifts if we needed it. And then the lead municipality was kind of discussed between all the players involved, and it was decided that right now, the way things currently sit, the best lead municipality would be the town of Coaldale to be able to employ the regional DEM, and we'll talk about the emergency management coordinator piece coming up, and kind of manage that regional budget under the direction of the committee as well. So looking a little bit more at the structure, kind of a similar structure to what we see internally, just expanded a little bit more right now. So we would have a regional emergency advisory committee that our regional DEM would report to. From there, we would look at having regional deputy DEMs to backfill in if that regional DEM is absent. The emergency management coordinator would be a position to help with the day-to-day activities of the regional system overall. And from there, each municipality would still have the ability to maintain a DEM to deal with more day-to-day, smaller stuff that wouldn't require that entire regional response to be activated. And then from there, we'd have a regional emergency management agency, so it would just expand out. Our agency currently consists of our town staff that respond to an event, all our partnering agencies that we deal with, or community organizations that we utilize to respond to an event would still be in there, just more on a regional aspect. So stuff like FCSS, those types of things would still be in place. So a regional director of emergency management would serve as the chair for the emergency management agency, so similar to what we see our DEM do currently, myself do currently. We'd prepare and coordinate all the plans and components of the program for all involved parties. Coordinate our emergency services or other resources used during a event, and perform other functions as prescribed by the committee. So whether that's public education, public involvement type stuff, other activities that our committee comes up with, kind of similar to what we do now. As well as recommend the appointment of deputy directors of emergency management, or sorry, regional deputy directors of emergency management to the committee. So our regional deputy directors of emergency management, we would like to see at least 2 within the system. But with that being said, we want 2 individuals that would be qualified, that are able to meet the requirements to be appointed as a DEM and have an excellent working knowledge of the system itself. And these would be, again, acting in the absence of the regional DEM. The municipal directors of emergency management, similar to described, would be for smaller events. If we had a small event that just required a little bit of messaging within our municipality, those municipal DEMs could still have the powers within the regional plan to deal with those types of things. With that being said, that's not stopping any of our communities from tapping into the regional system if we needed to for a larger event. And those municipal DEMs would serve as a key contact for their municipality as well. The emergency management coordinator is an additional position within the system. There's going to be a lot of initial workload added to developing a regional plan. All our communities have our own municipal emergency plan, but making that one cohesive plan so that we can work together. And then increasing our training and getting us working together more as one cohesive group instead of different municipalities that are responding together to oftentimes deal with a similar event. And it would drastically increase our ability to deliver that training, as well as just our post-event documentation, record keeping, and maintenance of our facilities. Facility-wise, the discussion with amongst the municipalities that we would maintain 2 fully functional emergency coordination centers, one north of the river being Pitcher Butte, one south of the river being the town of Coaldale. They're our best equipped and outfitted ECCs that would be easily maintained to be able to respond to an event without a lot of additional cost. There's a lot of benefits from a regional emergency management system. I think a lot of it comes back to duplication of resources and responding to events together. Oftentimes we're already doing that as communities. A lot of these events, it's hard to picture a major event that's probably not going to affect the town of Coaldale and Lethbridge County, or for a lot of the municipalities north of the river, an event that's not going to affect just Pitcher Butte and not bleed over into the county. So a lot of times there's going to be that multiple community response to these events. This would allow us to formalize that system prior to the actual event, further than just where we currently sit with our mutual aid agreement. I think our next steps, ultimately, this system currently is a cost neutral for Coaldale going into our next year, based on what we have currently budgeted. If we are able to successfully get a grant to push the system forward. So what we're really looking for today is council support to go forward with the grant application along with Pitcher Butte. They're going to be the applicant to the grant on our behalf, as well as for us to start drafting a agreement to bring back to council at a later date on what our regional emergency management system would actually look like between all our municipalities.
Did he miss anything, Kevin?
No, it did great.
He did indeed. Councilor Avery.
Thank you, Mayor. So how many new positions are we looking at?
That would be the addition of just the emergency management coordinator. I would be serving as the regional DEM within the system, so just one.
Okay, and as a follow-up, so we've already got a regional system with the county. So how, if we don't do this, is it going to impact us when we're already in that regional system? Why can't they just buy into a system we've already got?
So our current system with the county isn't necessarily regional. I serve as their DEM, so we do maintain two separate committees, two separate plans, two separate programs right now. So I'm more or less just their contracted DEM. So this would more see that amalgamation of it with one committee, one regional plan and program, and one agency as well, because they do have their separate agency that we don't contribute to or aren't a part of right now. And they see similar hurdles to us during events or exercises, being able to staff all their positions as well. So it would be looking at how that would go forward if the other municipalities decided to go forward with regionalization and we didn't, how that relationship would look between us and the county. I think.
One follow-up. So I'm a little bit leery about going into partnership with the municipalities north of the river. We tried that once with our municipal enforcement, and as soon as grants ran out, it fell onto the backs of Coaldale. And so I'm afraid that even if we get the grant and we administer the grant and we administer the program, exactly the same project in municipal enforcement, it comes back to Coaldale. Because all the other municipalities think they want this person for 30% of their time or 45% of their time, not weighing out their risk. That they think their risk is greater than what it is. So I'm really concerned about us going into another partnership with those municipalities.
Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Councillor Avery took my words out of my mouth. However, I wanted to have to simply add to that, Councillor, is that maybe there are some lessons that we have learned from that experience, and we might have a product that might be more doable. And of course, here you're also looking for ministerial order, which is trumps literally some of this, doesn't it?
Yeah, and Clayton can probably elaborate a little bit more on it, but really there's two avenues you can follow for creating this regional emergency management agency and committee. One's ministerial order, the other one is commission. So all of the municipalities decided that a commission wasn't the way to go, hence the ministerial order to get this put in place.
Yeah, and I think even in addition to that, the ministerial order makes it a little bit more binding in that aspect. And I think there have been some things learned from our previous relationships and stuff like that, from that CPO end of things that could be also included within our agreements.
Thank you. Kalen, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we were at Council Strategic Planning, this was an item that we discussed, and at that time, one of the potential concerns that I had with this program is that the larger entities, that being Coaldale and Lethbridge County, would be subsidizing some of the smaller entities, because at that time a purely per capita formula was used for cost sharing. And I'll have to credit my other CAO colleagues with coming up with a couple of revisions to that that makes it a lot more equitable for all potential partners, where there's a proposed flat fee of $7,500 that applies to every single municipality regardless of size. And then for the remaining costs, per capita is then used to determine what your total cost is after that. So we went from subsidizing the group at the time of strat planning at approximately $40,000 more than what we were currently paying into the program to now a cost neutral proposition if all municipalities agree to sign on. And I understand there's a couple other council meetings this evening where this very item is being discussed. If a couple of municipalities choose not to do it, we would have to recalculate the numbers to see what that would spit out for cost sharing. But if all municipalities join, right now the Village of Behr and the Town of Picture Butte Other councils have already made resolutions to join this, but I believe this evening, town of Nobleford, town of Colehurst are deliberating, and then Lethbridge County on Thursday. And so, we do recognize that, with timelines, the Alberta Community Partnership Grant deadline is December 16th, which is this Friday. So I just wanted to provide some of that background where financially we were able to move the needle in a way that I think is a lot more equitable and fair to some of the larger entities who have larger resources in the whole pooling aspect.
And one comment I think that needs to be made is that if council determines that they are not wanting to proceed with a regional emergency management partnership at this time, and the other municipalities within Lethbridge County proceed, there will be significant consideration given to our current contract relationship with Lethbridge County for emergency management services. So Clayton, can you speak to that a little bit?
I think that was tied in a little bit with Councilor Avery's comment. If Lethbridge County and the other 4 municipalities decided to go ahead with regionalization, I think council would have to kind of look at that agreement piece with Lethbridge County and Coaldale, because that would drastically change our relationship. Because right now we currently manage their emergency management program without the addition of those communities involved already.
Yeah, the risk there is if they all go ahead without us, they would likely find a different director of emergency management to run the program, which would be a loss of $40,000 in revenue for Clayton per year.
And then if I could just get clarification for our viewers at home, if we pass this resolution this evening, what's the financial impact?
It would be cost neutral for 2023 based on the grant. And again, if we didn't get the grant, we would come back to council for the correction.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Pickering.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. So if the grant does not come through the next year, then who would be funding this? Strictly the town of Coaldale and the municipalities?
Yeah, if it was approved without the grant being received, if the program did go forward, yeah, it would be strictly funded by the municipality.
And at this, it would cost us $7,500 for the year?
No, it's $7,500 plus a per capita expense.
So what does that work out to roughly?
Say that louder, please.
Probably 40,000. I guess the bigger question is how much is the per capita amount?
I might have.
Just while they're looking that up, I'm just going to give the resolution option that everybody can ponder while we're getting numbers here.
Mayor,
Oh, go ahead.
do you mind if I have
Oh,
a
I didn't
question
see her.
follow-up?
Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, it's to these two gentlemen, so while they're looking, or if you don't mind. So little over a month ago, we negotiated that contract with the county and got that contract accepted. And now with this regional emergency management plan, it almost sounds like that contract's being dangled in front of us, that we're being leveraged into this.
So thanks for the question, Councilor Beekman. It's important to note if, depending on which agreement you're referring to, fire and emergency services is completely separate from emergency management. So I'm not sure if you're thinking the fire contract that was just negotiated. Yes. Yeah. So completely separate. Looking at two different things here.
Okay, thank you.
I did find that number from Kyle. So if we didn't get the grant, it would be looking at roughly a $16,000 increase as the proposed budget sat between the municipalities.
16,000.
16,000.
Kalen, you have any follow-up comments?
I was just going to reinforce the fact that the Alberta Community Partnership Grant is central to getting this off the ground. My understanding in speaking with the other CIOs is that if we were unsuccessful in the grant, we would have to return back to our respective councils to see if they're still interested in proceeding and at what cost, or if we'd have to come up with a couple of different options to reduce the scale to make it more affordable. So I think at this stage, if council is interested, a conditional motion authorizing us to apply for the Alberta Community Partnership Grant, but also include something where in the event that we don't receive the grant, that we report back to council for further direction rather than just proceeding. So that would be, if this is something that council would like to do, I would recommend a conditional motion. I think would be in line with what I'm hearing from my CAO colleagues.
Councillor Avery.
Thank you. So question for Kalen, is this a long-term position? Is it a short-term position while this individual develops a regional plan that then can be upgraded and updated and dusted off every 10 years from our dam, or is it a long-term position?
Thanks, Councillor Avery. So the position we're looking at and that was talked about is a full-time position. That would be a long-term position. Yes, there's going to be a ton of work up front to get this thing off the ground and rolling. But there is legislative requirements under the Emergency Management Act and regulation for training, education, right? Exercises that have to be done. So this coordinator position would be responsible for ensuring that all municipalities are meeting those requirements, which is we want to avoid using our current DEB for all of that additional work for all 5 or 6 municipalities in that. So that position is the cost of that position is being spread over all municipalities. It's not the town of Coaldale so that we're paying for that position. They would just report to Clayton because we're the ones that are taking the lead in the project.
Thank you. We're good. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you. So I think you made a point about in your and you responded here to reduce workloads on each individual municipality. So you've addressed that. I'm just curious as to the member municipalities that are really interested and have passed motions to move forward, including those north of the river, and particularly Barons who eliminated their fire department completely. So they're dependent on Picture Butte, I think, for response or Nobleford.
Yeah.
So I think from their point of view, I think there is appetite to form a regional. I'm just concerned that they would be short-term and not long-term vision. And we practiced this once before, and I'd hate to see something fall by the wayside simply because there was an ACP grant available to us to apply for.
And if I can respond to that, Councillor Chapman, I understand the concern there. Some of those smaller municipalities have a very strong motivation to make this work because they also have to meet their legislative requirements under the Emergency Management Act, which they are not doing now. So if they join the committee, there's huge incentive for them to maintain that partnership so they meet the provincial requirements. So I think that would be a driving force behind them staying a part of this partnership. I think this is very different than municipal enforcement. This isn't a service that we're contracted to provide a certain person for so many hours. This is a partnership with all these other municipalities with a single plan. So reducing the redundance of work is huge. The efficiency in emergency management planning and training. Deputy Chief Rutberg talked about a lot of the benefits. So, I can't say for sure, but there's a strong incentive for those smaller municipalities to stay on board with this.
And just to follow up, Mayor, the statement of the statement of local or state of local emergency, I think that would be the one clear benefit that I see of a regional system.
Yeah, so with the regional system, the committee would be responsible for declaring sole. Clayton, correct?
Yeah, so yeah, it would depend on each individual council through the agreement. Still has the ability to delegate that power to the committee or retain that power within your council. So we could see some communities delegate that ability away. Again, I can't speak on behalf of all of them, but we could see some of our smaller communities delegate that ability to the Regional Emergency Advisory Committee. And we could see some communities maintain that through the agreement as well, but that is a possibility.
Kalen?
And just a couple quick comments. One of the categorical differences with this proposal is that Lethbridge County is a partner at the table, whereas with our CPO regionalization, Lethbridge County was not in the equation. So you had urban centers geographically far apart, and that resulted in a lot of unnecessary expenses when it came to providing a service from one urban 100 kilometers an hour from another urban. So having the county here is going to be helpful. And then from a relational perspective, given that we are going to be training together as a region, you're going to have the ops section chief from 4 different municipalities training together so that they can plug and play in the event there's a 24-hour event in a community. There's going to be relationships, I think, with this model that weren't present in the construction of the CPO regionalization model. Finance section chiefs are going to get to know each other from different communities. So I look at it as like there's a lot of networking benefits just by virtue of how we are going to train regionally with our subject matter experts. So I look at it like we're increasing our bench strength in the whole region.
Councillor Chapman?
Thank you. Mayor, through to Kalen then, is there going to be any additional equipment required to, like trucks or vehicles that this agency would need?
Okay, so sure. Thanks, Councillor Chapman. The two things we were looking at, and one is contingent on the grant. So we're going to be, if council approves, we're going to apply for $200,000 through the ACP grant. Part of that was looking at, I believe, $60,000 if we looked at a regional trailer, which would be a pull-behind trailer, kind of similar to an incident command post that could be taken out to large grass fires, large events that would be set up on scene. And the other is just a vehicle for the emergency management coordinator to use to travel around to all the communities. So one thing we would immediately cut from the budget should the grant not go through is the incident command trailer. However, the emergency management coordinator would still need a vehicle to get around. And that's it. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? I'm going to break this down into 2 different motions. We'll see if this one works. That council provide support to the application for the grant funding for a regional emergency management model. Further, that administration continue to work with the partnering municipalities to create a draft agreement that will be brought back to council for ratification at a later date. Furthermore, if the grant is not awarded, then the request return to council for further discussion. Does that work?
That's good.
Anybody want to sponsor that one? Councillor Saylor. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And then if you want to just speak briefly on us giving a letter of support for Pitcher Butte. So go ahead.
Yeah, so Pitcher Butte has offered to submit the grant application on behalf of the group, because some of the other municipalities involved have already submitted to that grant as well. So they haven't, so they've offered to do that grant application, which we're working with them in that aspect as well. We'll help them do that submission, but just looking for council's support to submit that grant application and that council's support.
Okay, thank you, Clayton. So then I'm looking for a second motion that council support the town of Pitcher Butte's application under the Alberta Community Partnership Grant Program for the creation and operation of a regionalized emergency management program involving the municipalities of Coaldale, Colehurst, Lethbridge County, Nobleford, Pitcher Butte, and Behr. Is there any discussion on that, Councilor or Deputy Mayor Pickering? You'll sponsor that one? Okay. Any questions, comments on that one? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen.
I do have one.
Go ahead.
Can I ask a question through to the chief? This coordinator that you're speaking about, that individual would be separate from the investigators or the inspectors that were.
That's correct. So, yeah, the safety codes officers again are within the fire and emergency services agreement. The emergency management coordinator is in a separate program. So,
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item 8.3, terms of reference for citizens on patrol. We have our municipal administration intern, Tom Anderson, presenting. Tom, when you're settled in, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn, and thank you, Council. Good evening. So its 2021-2025 strategic plan, Council identifies public safety as a key priority, and as a result has remained focused not only on ensuring strong collaboration between the town's community peace officer program and the RCMP, but also on exploring opportunities that will empower town residents to play a constructive role in helping local law enforcement keep the community safe. One of the opportunities currently being explored is the establishment of a Coaldale-based Citizens on Patrol group that, much like Citizens on Patrol groups in other Alberta municipalities, will work in conjunction with the local RCMP to keep watch over Coaldale streets and neighborhoods. Key considerations thus far, staff have taken on a facilitation role in laying out the groundwork for the Citizens on Patrol group. The pool of prospective candidates for the COP group launch has been relatively small thus far, but it is worth noting that most additions to the candidate pool have come in the past week. In time, it is our hope with further recruitment efforts that the candidate pool will increase to 20 plus candidates or more. Financial impact at this time is in the operating budget, of course, including staff time. Seed funding for the Citizens on Patrol group has been budgeted by the council in the amount of $2,500. And I'll jump to decision options here. The council approve the Citizens on Patrol terms of reference as presented, or that council direct administration to make further amendments and come back at a future council meeting and present a revised COP terms of reference. The recommendation, of course, is that council approve the Citizens on Patrol group terms of reference as presented. And I will now take questions.
Thank you. I just have a comment on the staff report, second last paragraph, and I'll just read it out here. Council has recognized that establishing a Citizens on Patrol group is a great way to ensure that Coaldale stays safe, all while having to spend significantly less money on policing costs. So my comment on that one is that we're not trying to replace the police on with this initiative. Like, we're there to help our RCMP members. So I just want a clarification on what you meant by that, by saving significantly more money on policing costs when this is just to augment what we already have.
Mm-hmm. For sure. What I meant by that was, I believe at one point there was consideration of possibly adding more police to Coaldale, and this it being another opportunity has come as a way for citizens to directly contribute to keeping the community safe, and at the same time not costing nearly as much as, say, adding another officer. This is really another channel or way that the citizens and residents of Coaldale can contribute. Of course, with the seed funding that's been guaranteed being $2,500, so at this time being a bit less than what was maybe looked into before with policing.
Thank you for the for the clarification. I just
Thank you
want
for the
for our
question.
viewers at home to understand that we're not doing this to replace our current policing model.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Open it up for questions, comments for Tom. I just have another question. The terms of reference, is this something that was templated by another municipality, or is this?
So this can be found on the ACOPA website, so the Alberta Citizens on Patrol Association, and basically it's really works as a nice framework just to kind of get this process rolling and laying a foundation for the Citizens on Patrol once it really gets going here.
Okay, thank you. And I'm totally in favor of starting the Citizens on Patrol. I think it would be good for our community to do that. Councillor Chapman and Councillor Reese and myself, along with the staff sergeant and our liaison officer, Kyler Short, we met with the Tabor group, and they've been in operation for over 20 years, and it's been very successful for them. And also when we had the open house at the Gem of the West, we had Kimberly Hurst. She's the Alberta Citizens on Patrol Director for this area. And she's offered to come and speak to council, I should say, and explain the program a little bit more in depth. So I'm just curious, and Kalen, you can jump in on this as well. Like, I know we need to do these terms of reference, but before we pass that and create them, should we listen to Kimberly first to put her spin on the program, or the templated terms of reference that you found are going to be adequate, is my question.
Yeah, if I may, you're doing great, Tom. I just, like, from my perspective, there's no urgent timeline for council to make a decision on the draft terms of reference that are before you. So it would be perfectly acceptable if you wish to refer the draft to Kimberly to have a review, or wait for her presentation. They're your terms of reference as a council, and so pending the results of her presentation, you may wish to make edits, or she might have some suggestions. What we wanted to do is not lose sight of this initiative that council had indicated was important, and so this is our way of being responsive to this council initiative that was discussed at that most recent community open house. So to answer your question, you don't have to approve them this evening, but we did want to get the conversation started formally at the council level.
No, I appreciate that, and I concur. Good job on your presentation, Tom. For myself and council, it's going to be at the will of council, but for myself, I'd like to have these terms of reference shared with Kimberly, and I would also like to take her up on her coming out and having a conversation as a delegation, and we could have Kyler Short, our RCMP liaison officer, attend as well. And if we're going to do this, I want to do it right out of the gate. So I'll open it up for questions, comments from members of council now. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and I agree 100% with what you're saying, and I'm not too sure yet if I have it clear in my mind is if this is going to be an association, a society, a club yet, and I think that's part of the terms of reference that you're looking for, is sort of the naming component to it, and how much at arm's length will this group be from council. So my understanding, and the lady's name again, Kimberly kind of gave us a brief description of what those terms are, and the relationship with the municipality, but not directly. Like Tabor has its own group; they just meet in the police station for that matter, and so they have their own funding program. So
I can comment to that then.
Yes, please.
So Town of Tabor, like you say, they have their own group. They're a society, and the reason that they formed a society is so that they have a funding stream. They can apply for bingos and casinos, and with less tax support to keep the program running. Again, with the terms of reference, Tom, this is a question for you. When you were looking that up on the website, is there any other municipalities that have council support? Is there a council member on that committee then?
From what I found in my research, I actually did not find a case like that, but I can certainly look into that.
Well, and again, that's would be something that Kimberly, she does that's her position to. So I would look towards her expertise on that. So would it be fair to, is there anybody that wants to deal with the terms of reference tonight, or is there appetite to table it until we hear from Kimberly?
I'd like to table it until we hear.
Okay, any further discussion on that? I'll call the question in. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
And then I'll reach out to Kimberly, and then I'll CC you on it. And once we make connection, and then I'll let you look after all that.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question for you, Mayor. Would it be too early to have the volunteers that Tom's kind of recruited? I guess would that be too early to have them part of that assembly and just like a first meeting, with her and kind of bounce some thoughts, just so that they feel engaged already, that they put their name or their thoughts or ideas or names forward.
I think that's a great idea to have them in the gallery listening.
Yeah.
Like if there's going to be a delegation at council, I don't want to have. We don't need to discuss the whole program during a council meeting, but you're more than welcome to come and sit and listen to the presentation. So. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the open portion of the meeting. So at 7:16 p.m., I will need someone to pass a resolution that council go into closed session in accordance with section 197-4-B of the Municipal Government Act to discuss matters exempt from disclosure for items 13.1, subject to section 21, intergovernment relations, item 13.2, subject to section 19, evaluations, item 13.3, subject to section 17, personal privacy. Can I get someone to sponsor that? Councillor Beekman. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. We'll take a 10-minute break.